Key issues might include such things as capacity, funding, relationships with headquarters, relationships with clients. 3. What would define a solution acceptable to both of you? You want to work on both short-term and long-term solutions. You realize that he can't simply push other orders aside and put yours first. That only creates more problems for everyone. You also want to minimize costs and future downtime, so additional overtime is not a real win either. Whatever happens, there needs to be consistency and reliability, and the foundations need to be laid for long-term improvement. Synergize. As you explore third alternative solutions, you might come up with several viable possibilities. You might be able to create greater lead times for the plant by gathering projected product needs from your clients. Some of your clients might be just as happy in the short run if the plant delivered partial orders on the scheduled delivery date and completed the order within a few days. You may be able to work within the marketing department to help the other sales representatives understand the issues. It may be that in the attempt to gain business, the reps are over-promising to their clients, creating an artificially inflated demand on the plant. Perhaps the plant manager could come and discuss the issues with the marketing department. A representative from marketing and the plant manager might look at the trends and write a joint analysis for headquarters around the value of added capacity for the plant. Perhaps by working together, you could improve efficiency in the order processing system so that more time is spent producing rather than documenting. You could pursue these or any number of other possible steps toward a solution. The point is that you're working together on the problem instead of against each other through the problem. By thinking win-win, seeking to understand, and creating synergy, your time and energy are spent generating solutions instead of creating conflict. The final outcome could be captured as part of an overall stewardship agreement. Example number 2. Suppose your 16-year-old daughter wants her own car. She wants to be able to come and go without being dependent on the availability of the family automobiles. She has some money saved up, but not enough to purchase a car for herself. Additionally, she says, many of her friends have their own cars and she feels that she's responsible and that you should trust her. Your first inclination is to say no. You know she's generally responsible, but she's been driving for less than a year and has already gotten a ticket. The fact that she's dependent on the family cars has allowed you to control, to some extent, where she goes and whom she goes with. You feel that at her age, she should not be free to go and do whatever she wants. In addition, you have to fork out money not only for the car, but for insurance premiums, gas, and overall maintenance. Again, this is not a situation with one simple answer. But how often does a situation like this become an open wound in a parent-child relationship? How easy would it be for your daughter to rebel because she feels you don't understand or trust her, or for you to put your foot down and assert your parental authority because you feel you know what's best? How much time and energy could be wasted in negative conflict? How can you come to a satisfactory resolution? Remember, think win-win, seek first to understand, and create synergy. As you work together to understand viewpoints, identify issues, and create synergistic third alternative solutions, you might consider creating a win-win stewardship agreement around an additional family car. She could use this car as long as certain criteria were met. You could specify maintenance requirements and have her pay for the additional insurance and gas. You might come to an agreement about communicating where she's going and with whom. As part of the agreement, you might also specify that she help out with the transportation needs of some of the younger children, freeing up time for you or your spouse. The point is not that this solution is the ideal or that third alternative solutions are easy to come by. The point is that when the problem is before you instead of between you, you avoid generating negative cycles in a critical relationship that could take months or years to resolve. and this powerfully affects time and quality of life for everyone involved. Although most win-win stewardship agreements would not deal with such explosive and divisive issues as those involved in the following experiences, we'd like to share them with you just to give an idea of how powerful this process can be. It can apply to most any divisive issue imaginable. Stephen: at one time, I was training 200 MBA students at an Eastern university, and many faculty and invited guests were there as well. We took the toughest, most sensitive, most vulnerable issue they could come up with: abortion. We had a pro-life person and a pro-choice person who both felt really deeply about their positions come to the front of the classroom, and they had to interact with each other in front of these 200 students. I was there to insist that they practice the habits of effective interdependence. Think win-win, seek first to understand, and synergize. Are you two willing to communicate until we can come up with a win-win solution? I don't know what it would be. I don't feel they... Wait a minute. You won't lose. You will both win. But how could that possibly be? One of us wins, the other loses. Are you willing to try to go for it? Remember not to capitulate. Don't give in. Don't compromise. I guess. Okay. Seek first to understand. You can't make your point until you restate his point to his satisfaction. As they began to dialogue, they kept interrupting each other. Yeah, but don't you realize that... I said, wait a minute. I don't know if the other person feels understood. Do you feel understood? Absolutely not. Okay, you can't make your point. You cannot believe the sweat those people were in. They couldn't listen. They had each other judged right off the bat because they took different positions. Finally, after about 45 minutes, they started to really listen. And you cannot imagine the effect upon them, personally, emotionally, and the effect upon the entire audience watching this process go on. When they listened openly and empathically to the underlying needs and the fears and the feelings of people on such a tender issue, it was a very powerful thing. The two people in front had tears in their eyes. Half the audience had tears in their eyes. They were categorically ashamed of how they had judged each other, labeled each other, and condemned all who thought differently. They were totally overwhelmed by the synergistic ideas that came out about what could be done. They came up with a number of alternatives, including new insights into prevention, adoption, and education. After 2 hours, each said of the other, "We had no idea that's what it meant to listen. Now we understand why they feel the way they do." The spirit of true empathy is foundational to effective synergy. It transcends negative energy around positioning. It creates openness and understanding and unites people in problem solving. The key issue becomes the quality of the relationship between the people involved and their ability to communicate and synergize with each other in seeking third alternative solutions. We've seen the spirit of empathy transform situations time and time again. It happened as the head of a hospital system and the director of medicine grappled with a tender issue around the hiring of primary care physicians for 2 hours in front of an audience of about 150 hospital trustees, administrators, physicians, and others involved in a very large hospital system. It happened with an organization that had overreacted to a regulatory environment that was suppressing the initiative, creativity, and ingenuity of the design engineers to the point that they wanted to leave the culture and go somewhere else. The top people, representing the two different points of view, went through this process and they came up with a whole new approach that maintained the creativity and ingenuity of the design engineers and also met the criteria of the regulatory agency. It happened in a large corporation where there was a long-term fight going on between one of the major divisions and the top executives about how assets should be devalued. The division felt it was totally demoralizing their culture. The top executives were defending the practice. But as they began to go through this process, the spirit of empathy transformed them. People started looking both in the same direction with a sense of shared vision and stewardship toward it, instead of fighting each other. They began to be respectful in their communications, creative in their suggestions, and in a period of literally half an hour, a deeply embedded issue that had divided the company to the point that no one would even discuss it was resolved. And people were totally astounded at the power of this interdependence. When people really think win-win, when they seek to deeply understand each other, and they focus their energy towards solving problems synergistically instead of against each other, the effects are profound. We've seen the power of this process in the most tense, difficult situations imaginable. At one time, as I was traveling to work with a major corporation, I called and they said, "Go home." They just canceled the meeting. Why? What happened? The union walked out. Why? Because some of the people were not being treated as agreed. Does management acknowledge it? Yes, they do. Then now's the time. The circumstances are right. Hold the meeting. Don't withdraw. People will just tend to polarize and get into their positions and gather people to attack. Earlier, we had taught the win-win process to people throughout the organization, and it was having a profound effect on personal and family lives. Some of the people in the middle had even put together a video with testimonials of the power of this process. But the top people, in a sense, felt they were above it. They didn't need it. We said to management, "Apologize. It's such a small thing. Get that meeting back on. Now is the time." They apologized. It was the first time something like that had ever happened, but it was a correct principle. The union president was taken aback. "Okay," he said, "we'll come. But we'll come in late as a statement so that you don't think we're just selling out." When I went to the meeting, I said to the president of the company and the president of the union, "I'm going to ask you to do something that will take a lot of courage. Are you willing to try?" After some hesitation, they both agreed. I asked the two of them to come to the front of the auditorium. I said, "I just want you to listen to what these people are saying. You know the ambitious, almost heroic goals that have been established for you, and that apparently you have bought into." I turned to the audience. How many here honestly believe with the present state of your culture you could achieve those goals? This was a big auditorium with 700 or 800 people there, from first-level supervisors all the way to the top executives. I didn't see a hand. Now, how many of you believe that if we literally practice the process we've been talking about, think win-win, seek first to understand, synergize, that we could accomplish those seemingly impossible heroic goals? Almost to a person, their hands were up. I turned to the two of them and I said, "Look at the message of this organization. I want to ask you two to commit in front of everybody that you will learn and team teach this process to your direct reports, and to have them, with their counterparts, team teach their direct reports until everyone gets involved in this and you resolve this issue. Now, if you're not prepared to live by that commitment, don't make it. Say, want to think about it. Let's wait. You don't want to create an expectation you cannot deliver on." They looked at each other for a long time. You can't imagine the tension in that room. Finally, they put out their hands and shook, then embraced. The place exploded with applause. Today, they're one of the leading organizations in America, not just because of that experience. There were many variables, but their willingness to apply this process made a quantum difference in the quality of life for all stakeholders. Is there any time management technique that will save that kind of time? We're not talking about control and gopher delegation or even good delegation. We're talking about moving out of transactional and into transformational relationships, into true empowerment. We're talking about tapping into the power of the unique human endowments of everyone involved in a synergistic process by which we can discuss even the undiscussables and resolve tender issues in ways that benefit everyone. Win-win is not adversarial, it's synergistic. It's not transactional, it's transformational, and everyone who participates in it or witnesses it can see it. The difference of first things first together. What if we all lived and worked in cultures with shared vision and stewardship agreements, where win-win was a way of interacting? What difference would it make? Consider supervision. In a low-trust culture, supervision is associated with words like control, monitor, hover over, and check up. In a high-trust culture, people supervise themselves according to the agreement. The criteria are clear, the consequences are set. There's common understanding of what's expected. A manager, leader, or parent becomes a source of help, a facilitator, helper, cheerleader, advisor, counselor, and coach, someone to remove the oil spills and then get out of the way. What about evaluation? In a low-trust culture, you're into forced ranking, external performance evaluation, judgment. In a high-trust culture, the judgment goes into the performance agreement before the fact instead of after the fact. People judge themselves. Their evaluation is not just a function of measurement, but also of discernment. The numbers are looking good, but I feel a concern about this particular area. People are much more aware of the issues that affect their performance and success. What about span of control? In a low-trust culture, the span of control is small. It takes time and energy to hover over, check up. You can only control so many people. In a high-trust culture, you don't need to hover over and check up. You aren't trying to control, but to release. Instead of 1 to 8 or 10, you have 1 to 50, 1 to 100, 1 to 200. What about motivation? In a low-trust culture, you're into the great jackass theory of motivation, the carrot out in front, the stick behind. In a high-trust culture, people are internally motivated. They're fueled by the fire within. They're driven by a sense of passion about fulfilling a shared vision that's also a co-mission, a synergy between their own mission and the mission of the family or organization. What about structure and systems? A low-trust culture is filled with bureaucracy, excessive rules and regulations, restrictive, closed systems. In the fear of some loose cannon, people set up procedures that everyone has to accommodate. The level of initiative is low. Basically, do what you're told. Structures are pyramidal, hierarchical. Information systems are short-term. The quarterly bottom line tends to drive the mentality and the culture. In a high-trust culture, structures and systems are aligned to create empowerment, to liberate people's energy and creativity toward agreed-upon purposes within the guidelines of shared values. There's less bureaucracy, fewer rules and regulations, more involvement. Now, what kind of impact does this difference have on our time? How much time is spent in low-trust cultures controlling, monitoring, hovering over, checking up, snoopervising? How much time is spent on competitive evaluation systems, evaluation game playing, and motivational programs? How much time is spent dealing with bureaucratic systems, rules, and regulations? How much time is spent sorting out the myriad of communication problems that grow out of low trust? And what about the time and opportunity cost when people are so busy micromanaging and taking care of immediate crises that they don't invest in high-leverage Quadrant 2 planning, prevention, and empowerment activities that make the significant difference? We spend an incredibly inordinate amount of time dealing with symptoms of low trust, and learning how to deal with the symptoms faster is not going to make a qualitative difference. First things first together is a function of empowerment. It's the ultimate way of moving the fulcrum over from the 1-to-1 ratio to a 1 unit of effort to 1,000 units of results ratio. There's no time management technique that can even begin to approach the results. And that's why empowerment is at the heart of Quadrant 2. empowerment from the inside out. Anytime we think the problem is out there, that thought is the problem. It would be wonderful if we all lived and worked in empowered, high-trust cultures. Obviously, we don't. The organizations we work in are often inundated by rules, regulations, and red tape. We have mixed directions, competitive systems. Levels of initiative are low. People essentially get their satisfaction off the job. They spend much of their on-the-job time in quadrant 3, politicking, backbiting, blaming, accusing, and confessing each other's sins. Then they stand around in the halls, massaging each other's hearts. Can you believe what this manager did? Really? Let me tell you about my experience. No wonder we can't get anything done around here. Well, what do you expect? So, what can we do? Anytime we think the problem is out there, that thought is the problem. We disempower ourselves. In other words, we give away our space, the space that allows us to choose a constructive response. We empower circumstances and the weaknesses of other people to control us. We put our energy into our circle of concern, into things over which we have no control. Principle-centered leadership is the personal empowerment that creates empowerment in the organization. It's focusing our energy in our circle of influence. It's not blaming or accusing, it's acting with integrity to create the environment in which we and others can develop character and competence and synergy. We may not be the leader, but we're a leader, and as we exercise principle-centered leadership, our circle of influence grows. Stephen. Several years ago, a man who was in lower-level management in an organization wanted to come to one of our seminars. The program was for top executives, but he wanted to come so badly he literally begged them to let him come. Finally, the sheer pressure of persistence broke them down and they agreed. This man was so proactive, he just took the ball and started running. He began to focus on personal and professional growth and enlarging his skill base. He got one promotion after another, and within 2 years, he was the number 3 man in the organization. Then he decided to go out into the community and help solve some of the larger social issues. He was so dynamic, he became an executive secretary in a service organization, and was even asked to join them full-time, but he didn't want to leave his organization. I'm convinced you could drop that man naked and penniless anywhere, and within a short period of time, he would rise to the top of an organization because he is so proactive, sensitive, and aware. I'll never forget the light in his eyes when he started to sense the power of working in his circle of influence. In this chapter, we'd like to look at 3 specific things we can do in any circle of influence to work in quadrant 2. To empower ourselves and help transform our environment, cultivate the conditions of empowerment, feast on the lunch of champions, become a leader servant. 1. Cultivate the conditions of empowerment. Empowerment can't be installed, it has to be grown. It's a matter of nurturing the conditions that create it. The more these conditions are present, the more empowered the culture will be. We don't really empower other people, but by nurturing these conditions, we create the environment in which they can empower themselves through the use of their 4 endowments. This is high-leverage quadrant 2 investment that brings great returns. To one degree or another, each of these conditions is in our circle of influence. Let's consider these conditions to see where and how we can focus our efforts to create empowering change. Condition 1. Trustworthiness. At the heart of empowerment is trustworthiness, which is a function of character and competence. Character is what we are. Competence is what we can do. And both are necessary to create trustworthiness. Stephen. A man I know well has a slight limp because of a loose left knee. He went to a doctor who was a very fine person, but incompetent. He wasn't skillful in performing a 3-dimensional activity while looking at a 2-dimensional monitor. He did a little cleaning up of the cartilage, but he didn't diagnose the extenuated anterior cruciate ligament. As a result, this man never got into therapy. He never paid the real price. Later, when his daughter and son had their knees injured in athletics, he didn't send them to this doctor. He didn't trust him. One CEO, hearing that story, said, "Now I understand for the first time why I don't trust some people. I think, you're a good person, you're honest, so why don't I trust you? I realize now it's because they're not competent. They haven't stayed current in their profession. They're obsolete. They've been carried by the organization. They don't have the spirit of continuous improvement." But competence without character doesn't inspire trust either. You wouldn't want to go to a doctor who had the competence but was dishonest. Perhaps you only need therapy, but there's money in an operation, so he may convince you to submit to surgery you don't even need. Both character and competence are necessary to inspire trust, and both are completely within our circle of influence. Character includes integrity, the ability to walk your talk, a thorough integratedness of public, private, and deep inner life around a balanced set of principles. Maturity, the balance of courage and consideration that enables you to say what needs to be said, to give honest feedback, to address issues in a straightforward way, but with consideration and respect for the feelings, thoughts, and opinions of others. Abundance mentality, the paradigm that life is ever expanding, that there are an infinite number of third alternatives, in contrast to the paradigm that life is a zero-sum game, that the pie is only so large, and if anyone else gets a piece, that means less for me. Competence includes technical competence, the knowledge and skill to achieve the agreed-upon results, the ability to think through problems and look for new alternatives. Conceptual competence, the ability to see the big picture, to examine assumptions and shift perspectives. Interdependent competence, the ability to interact effectively with others, including the ability to listen, communicate, get to third alternatives, create win-win agreements, and work towards synergistic solutions. The ability to see and operate effectively and cooperatively in complete organizations and systems. Character and competence are high leverage areas of focus that make each of the other conditions possible. A division of a large international firm was able to see how this connection was impacting their unsuccessful attempt to implement a total quality program. They essentially said, "Our problem is scarcity. We have scarcity in the way we admit people into our ranks, scarcity in the way we promote them, scarcity in the way we compensate them, scarcity in the way they're made partners, scarcity in the way the rewards of partnership are distributed. No wonder we have such a messed up culture. No wonder there's so much jealousy. There's so much feigned, pretended, cosmetic unity. But down deep inside, there are forces that are splitting this culture apart. Hidden agendas operating everywhere, relationship problems, departments at the throats of other departments. We have to have heavy structures and systems, rules and regulations just to bring sufficient order to the organization to enable it to survive the changing environment. There are benchmarking evidences that we are not with it anymore. We realize we're not going to get with it with a quick-fix compartmentalized paradigm that isn't based on an ecological understanding of what creates this synergistic culture. We see it happening time and time again. People scripted in competition create competitive rather than cooperative systems. People with a fundamental urgency paradigm create systems that grow out of it. Even when someone else comes in and tries to install win-win or importance-based systems and structures, if the fundamental paradigm remains unchanged, people will revert to their paradigms when push comes to shove. The reality is that character and competence drive everything else in the organization. To nurture character and competence is the most high-leverage thing we can do to create empowerment. One powerful way we can nurture character and competence is to ask ourselves questions as we prepare to set our weekly goals. What knowledge or skills do I need to do the job better and to interact more effectively with other people? Am I exercising courage to move things ahead and deal with the issues? Am I being considerate and sensitive to the needs of others? Am I constantly looking for third alternative solutions? Am I listening to my conscience and acting in a way that's in alignment with my mission and true north? These questions invite conscience to pinpoint areas for focused effort. Based on the answers, we can set sharpen the saw or role-related goals for improvement. Do I have meaningful stewardship agreements in each of my roles? Are there any agreements that need to be strengthened, modified, or taken to a higher level? Am I acting with integrity to carry out the agreements I've made? Anytime we help create shared vision and strategy with a boss, a peer, a direct report, a spouse, a child, an associate, we empower ourselves and others. Condition 4, self-directing individuals and teams. In a high-trust culture, who supervises? The agreement. Self-direction based on the agreement is in our circle of influence. We can accept the responsibility to govern ourselves as individuals and as part of groups or teams in harmony with true north and according to the agreements we've made. We can do what we've agreed to do, including plan, act, and evaluate, without someone having to direct, control, check up, and hover over. And we can build this capacity in others not by supervising methods, but by holding people accountable for results and being a source of help to them in achieving those results. Questions we could ask during Quadrant 2 organizing might include, do I typically wait until I'm told to do things I already know ought to be done? Do I allow others the freedom to use those methods that work best for them, regardless of my personal preference, as long as they accomplish agreed-upon results? Do I give others space while they work, or am I constantly hovering over and checking up? Condition 5, aligned structures and systems. When structures and systems are aligned, they facilitate empowerment. When they aren't, they work against it. If you're trying to use importance as a governing paradigm and your planning system is set up on a daily to-do basis, your system is not aligned. If you're trying to build responsibility in your children and you're constantly giving them detailed gopher delegation, what to do, how to do it, and when to do it, your system is not aligned. If you're trying to encourage cooperation in your organization, but you're rewarding competition, your system is not aligned. In each of these cases, you're working against the very things you're trying to accomplish. When structure and systems are aligned, they create integrity or integratedness. They facilitate rather than roadblock what you're trying to do. Some structures will be in our circle of influence, others will not. If we're in a position of formal leadership, we may have responsibility for systems such as compensation, information, or training that will impact the time and quality of life of many people. Investing in Quadrant 2 time to create abundance-based, principle-based systems develops powerful alignment in the culture. But even if we're not in a position to create structures and systems for the organization, we can still take appropriate opportunity to influence their creation or recreation. We can take Quadrant 2 time to create aligned systems and structures in our personal life, our organizer, our personal information systems, our personal development program. We can create them in our family and nurture an environment where stewardship agreements become the way of interacting. We can help create them in our work team or in community service or special interest groups. In any sphere where we interact with others, we can raise the issues and help create structures and systems that are based on true north. This reiterates another important difference between management and leadership. While management works in the system, leadership works on the system. As we do our weekly organizing, we can nurture aligned structure and systems as we ask, are there any systems or structures that are getting in the way of the desired results? Are there any systems or structures that could be created to better facilitate the accomplishment of the desired results? What is the best method I could use within my circle of influence to create or change these systems? How can I work synergistically with others to create change? What personal systems and structures do I have that I could improve? Condition 6, accountability. When we're in an environment of growing trust where win-win stewardship agreements are being developed and structures and systems are aligned, how does accountability take place? Largely through self-accountability against the criteria of the agreement. Specific things we can do to nurture accountability include building specific criteria into the agreement, exercising discernment, and requesting and receiving feedback.